Before the Spanish set foot in the New World, there stood an empire of gold, the Aztec Empire. From the 1300s to the early 1500s, they built a civilization of warriors, wealth, and wonder in the heart of what is now Mexico City. In this episode of Empires of Gold, we'll uncover how a wandering tribe rose from the swamps of Lake Texcoco to create Tenochtitlan, one of the greatest and richest cities in human history, and how their quest for glory shaped a legend that still echoes today. The rise of the Aztec Empire before gold, before empire, before the name Aztec echoed across the mountains. They were wanderers, nomads searching for a sign. According to legend, their god Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, commanded them to find a place where an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. For over 2 centuries, they roamed the valleys of central Mexico. Outcasts, poor, despised by settled tribes, but hardship forged them. They learned to fight, to trade, to survive, and in 1325, they found their sign on a small swampy island in Lake Texcoco. There, amid reeds and water, they built a city that would rise like a vision from the lake, Tenochtitlan. At first, it was nothing more than huts on mud and reeds, but their ambition was relentless. They drained the marshes, built causeways, and created floating gardens, chinampas, where crops grew in perfect order upon the water. Within a century, Tenochtitlan became a city of over 200,000 people, larger than London or Paris at the time. And with prosperity came gold. Gold to the Aztecs was more than wealth. It was the excrement of the gods. The sunlight made solid. They used it to honor their deities, to craft ornaments, masks, and jewelry so bright that Spanish chroniclers would later say the entire city shimmered like dawn. But their real treasure wasn't just metal, it was tribute. As they grew stronger, the Aztecs began to conquer neighboring city-states. Every victory brought tribute in gold: jade, cacao, feathers, cotton, and slaves. By the late 1400s, more than 400 towns and provinces paid tribute to Tenochtitlan. The tribute lists found by Spanish scribes record staggering amounts: thousands of cloaks, hundreds of baskets of cacao, and more than 7,000 pieces of gold jewelry sent to the emperor each year. The empire's economy pulsed like a living heart. Markets such as Tlatelolco, the twin city beside Tenochtitlan, saw over 60,000 people gather daily to buy and sell. Gold dust was used as currency. Cocoa beans were weighed like coins. Merchants, Pozteca, became wealthy beyond measure, traveling thousands of miles to trade obsidian, jade, and exotic goods. But wealth has a way of transforming faith into ambition. As their temples rose higher, so did their hunger, not just for riches, but for power. Every victory meant more tribute, more offerings, more gold to please the gods of the sun, and every offering demanded blood. From humble wanderers, they became lords of the valley, an empire born not of mercy, but of will. Their city shone with gold, their markets overflowed with riches, and their armies stretched across the mountains. The Aztecs had risen from mud and myth, and now they ruled the world around them. But power always comes with a price, and the gods, they believed, always collect their debt. The Golden City, life, wealth, and power in Tenochtitlan. By the dawn of the 16th century, Tenochtitlan was the beating heart of the Aztec world, a city so magnificent that even its enemies spoke of it with awe. It rose from the waters of Lake Texcoco like a dream. 4 great causeways connected it to the mainland. Canals shimmered beneath stone. Bridges, white temples and palaces, gleamed in the sunlight, and everywhere, gold. Walls, adorned with golden serpents, altars, lined with plates of beaten gold. The emperor's throne itself, covered in turquoise and shimmering metal, was a symbol of divine light. At its peak, the city held over 200,000 people, making it one of the largest urban centers on Earth, cleaner, more organized, and more advanced than most of Europe. In the marketplace of Tlatelolco, more than 60,000 merchants gathered daily. You could buy anything: cacao beans, rare feathers from the jungles, jade, obsidian, carved turquoise masks, or gold dust sold by the pinch. Spanish chronicler Bernal Diaz del Dume Castillo wrote that the market seemed as if the entire world had gathered there. But Gold wasn't just a symbol of luxury. It was the lifeblood of the empire. The Aztecs demanded tribute from over 400 provinces. Each year, they received tons of gold jewelry, thousands of cotton garments, and loads of cacao and turquoise. The emperor's treasuries overflowed, and the workshops of artisans, goldsmiths, feather workers, and sculptors turned tribute into divine beauty. In the emperor's palace, even the gardens whispered of wealth. Montezuma's botanical gardens, the first of their kind in the Americas, held exotic animals, flowers, and fountains that flowed with pure water brought by aqueduct from distant mountains. Guests walked among aviaries filled with hummingbirds, jaguars, and eagles, symbols of the empire's reach. And in the temples above the city, priests performed rituals to honor the gods who made all this wealth possible. They believed that gold carried the essence of the sun, and to keep the sun alive, they offered not just gold, but hearts. It was the price of balance. Yet, behind this splendor lay a truth as sharp as obsidian. The same tribute that brought gold to the capital brought resentment to the provinces. The same riches that dazzled the priests filled the hearts of others with envy. Tenochtitlan stood as a golden mirror, beautiful, powerful, but fragile. And across the sea, another empire, hungry for gold and glory, had already begun to stir. The Aztecs had mastered the art of power, but soon they would meet those who had mastered the art of conquest, gods, blood, and glory. The power that drove an empire for the Aztecs. Power wasn't only measured in gold, it was measured in sacrifice. They believed the world itself was built upon the bones of past creations, each destroyed when the gods grew weary. To keep this fifth sun, their current age, alive, they had to repay the debt of creation. In blood. It wasn't cruelty, it was duty. To the Aztecs, human sacrifice was an offering of energy, a sacred exchange to keep the universe in balance. Every beating heart lifted to the sky was a promise that the sun would rise again. At the center of it all stood the Templo Mayor, a double pyramid that rose nearly 100 feet high in the heart of Tenochtitlan. From its twin shrines, priests honored Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, and Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility. One demanded blood, the other demanded tears. Together they ruled the cycle of life and death. On festival days, the temple steps ran red. Chroniclers wrote that thousands of captives could be sacrificed in a single ceremony, though some numbers were likely exaggerated by the Spanish. Still, even conservative estimates show that hundreds of lives were offered each year in rituals that blended faith, politics, and fear. And through it all, gold gleamed. The priests wore breastplates of hammered gold, their arms painted blue and black, their faces masked in obsidian. The altars shone with gold leaf, reflecting the sunrise like divine fire. To the Aztecs, gold wasn't currency. It was the skin of the gods. They called it Teocuitlatl, the excrement of the gods. It was sacred, not for spending, but for honoring power. This devotion made the Aztecs unstoppable. Their armies, known as the Jaguar and Eagle warriors, were not just soldiers but holy instruments. Each victory fed the gods and filled Tenochtitlan's coffers with tribute. Every conquered city meant more captives for the temples, more gold for the emperor, and more glory for the sun. But this system, so perfect, so divine, carried a hidden flaw. The same faith that united the empire also blinded it. Prophecies told that one day bearded gods would return from the east, bearing fire and iron. So when strange ships appeared on the horizon in 1519, shimmering like floating temples, many believed it was fate itself arriving. The empire of gold had been built upon faith, but faith can be both strength and weakness. Soon, it would face a force that worshipped gold in a very different way. Montezuma's empire, wealth beyond imagination. By the early 1500s, the Aztec Empire had reached its zenith, and at its summit stood Emperor Montezuma II, a man who ruled like a god among mortals. Montezuma was no mere warrior king. He was a philosopher, a priest, and a ruler whose word could alter the fate of nations. He inherited a world built on conquest and turned it into one of opulence, an empire gilded in gold, jewels, and divine authority. Within his palace, an architectural wonder stretching across acres. Walls were lined with jade mosaics, and gardens bloomed with rare flowers from across Mesoamerica. There were aquariums filled with exotic fish, aviaries of hummingbirds and eagles, and chambers dedicated solely to golden treasures. When envoys came bearing tribute, they entered through courtyards so vast they seemed endless. Each province of the empire sent its own tribute in gold, cotton, cacao, and precious stones, all carefully catalogued by scribes using pictographs on deerskin. The empire's annual tribute, as recorded by historians, would today equal millions in gold and luxury goods. Every corner of Tenochtitlan glowed with wealth. Artisans forged intricate jewelry, crafting serpent pendants and sun, discs of pure gold so polished they could blind in the light. The emperor's headdress alone, woven from quetzal feathers and inlaid with gold, was worth a fortune beyond imagination. But Montezuma's power was more than material. It was spiritual. He was the living embodiment of the god's will, believed to carry divine energy. When he appeared before his people, few dared to meet his eyes. He changed his garments 4 times a day, each outfit worn only once, and servants collected them to be burned as sacred remnants of his divinity. Gold, to Montezuma, was more than wealth. It was proof of divine favor. He saw its brilliance as a reflection of the sun's eternal fire, the very essence of life. Yet in that reverence lay the empire's fatal flaw. For across the ocean, another world had begun to worship gold too, not as the skin of gods, but as the key to power and dominion. When Montezuma heard of the pale strangers landing on the coast, men clad in metal, riding beasts unknown, he hesitated. Was it war or prophecy fulfilled? Some said these newcomers came from the east, just as legend foretold. Could they be messengers of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, the one who promised to return? In the years to come, this question would decide the fate of the empire. And Montezuma's golden throne, the very symbol of divine power, would become the prize of another empire rising beyond the sea. The encounter. When 2 worlds collided in the spring of 1519, 13 ships appeared off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. They carried about 600 men, 16 horses, and a hunger for glory that knew no limits. Their leader, Hernán Cortés, was not a nobleman, but a soldier of fortune, and to him, rumors of cities paved with gold were not myths. They were destiny. The Spaniards stepped ashore armed with steel, muskets, and faith. They claimed to bring the light of Christ, but what they truly sought was gold. When they heard of a vast empire inland, ruled by a divine emperor and filled with treasures beyond imagination, Cortés's course was set. Far inland, Montezuma received the first reports with unease. He heard of men who rode deer as tall as houses, who carried lightning in their hands, and whose skin was pale as bone. His priests read the omens, comets blazing in the night sky, temples struck by lightning, and strange voices in the wind. The signs were clear. Change was coming. So Montezuma did not send armies. He sent gifts. Gold masks, feathered shields, necklaces of turquoise and coral, all meant to show his divine generosity. But to Cortés, it was confirmation of everything he hoped. A land bursting with riches ripe for the taking. He sent back word to Spain describing Tenochtitlan as a city richer than any in the world. The march inland was brutal. The Spanish allied with tribes who hated the Aztecs' rule, the Tlaxcalans, fierce warriors who had long paid tribute to Tenochtitlan. With every step, Cortés gained more men, more weapons, and more resolve. When he finally reached the capital, what he saw stunned even him. Tenochtitlan shimmered like a vision from a dream. Canals instead of streets, temples that touched the sky, and gold so abundant it reflected the sun in every direction. Montezuma welcomed him as an honored guest, believing, or perhaps hoping, he was Quetzalcoatl returned. He offered the Spaniards a palace, feasts, and more gifts of gold. Cortés wrote, "This city is as large as Seville or Córdoba. Its wealth is beyond anything I have ever seen." But as the Spaniards admired the splendor, their greed began to burn. Gold hung from the walls. Statues gleamed in every temple, and soon admiration turned to hunger. In that moment, two worlds stood face to face, one ruled by gods of the sun and sacrifice, the other driven by the cross and the crown. Each saw the other as chosen by destiny, and both could not survive. The Empire of Gold had met its reflection and its undoing, the calm. Before the fall in the heart of Tenochtitlan, two worlds shared a fragile peace. Gifts were exchanged. Words of friendship were spoken. But beneath the surface, greed and fear began to stir. The Aztecs saw gods. The Spaniards saw gold. And soon, that golden city, shining like the sun itself, would be consumed by fire and betrayal. In the next chapter of Empires of Gold, we'll witness the fall, the imprisonment of Montezuma, the bloodshed that turned paradise to ash, and the moment when an empire built on faith and gold faced its final, tragic dawn. If you've felt the power of the Aztec Empire, its beauty, its brilliance, its glory, then you won't want to miss what comes next. Subscribe to Empires of Gold and join us as we uncover the fall of the Aztec Empire. Because history is written by those who survive and remembered by those who listen.